The first time Cole Harrison saw her, he forgot how to tie his own tie. This is the story of how a single father's broken heart found its way back to beating again, and how the most powerful woman in corporate America discovered that sometimes the greatest strength is found in surrender. But what nobody expected was this: the secret she'd been hiding could destroy everything they were building together. Cole stood in the elevator of Harrison Logistics, his fingers fumbling with the silk fabric around his neck for the fourth time that morning. The Windsor knot he'd perfected over 15 years of corporate meetings had suddenly become an impossible puzzle. His reflection in the polished elevator doors showed a man who looked put together on the outside, tailored charcoal suit, freshly shaved jaw, dark hair styled with just enough product to suggest effort without trying too hard. But his eyes told a different story. They carried the weight of sleepless nights, of bedtime stories read with manufactured enthusiasm, of parent-teacher conferences attended alone, of a 4-year-old daughter who still sometimes asked when mommy was coming home. The morning had started the way too many mornings started. Harper had spilled cranberry juice across his first tie while reaching for her cereal bowl, tears already welling in her eyes before the liquid even hit the floor. The nightmare had woken her again at 3 in the morning, the same one about the woman with honey-colored hair who used to live in their apartment but didn't anymore. Cole had held his daughter until the trembling stopped, whispering promises he wasn't sure he could keep about how everything would be okay, how Daddy was here, how she was safe. By the time Harper finally drifted back to sleep, the alarm was already screaming its digital protest into the darkness. Now standing in this ascending metal box, Cole tried to remember the basic mechanics of fabric manipulation. Loop, tuck, pull. Or was it tuck, loop, pull? His brain, foggy from exhaustion and the weight of today's merger meeting, refused to cooperate. The company his father had built from nothing, the company Cole had sworn to protect even as his personal life crumbled around him, hung in the balance. One meeting, one decision, one chance to save 200 jobs and the legacy his old man had died building. The elevator dinged, announcing the 47th floor. The executive suite, where Isla Vaughn, CEO of Vaughn Capital, waited to determine whether Harrison Logistics would survive or become another casualty of corporate consolidation. Forbes had called her ruthlessly efficient. The Wall Street Journal preferred the term most formidable negotiator of her generation. The traders who'd watched her dismantle companies 3 times the size of Cole's had a simpler nickname: the Ice Queen of Wall Street. Cole stepped out into the pristine corridor, still wrestling with his tie, when he collided with something soft and warm that smelled like jasmine and vanilla. The impact sent his briefcase tumbling, papers scattering across the marble floor in a humiliating display of professional incompetence. Words formed automatically, years of Southern upbringing demanding apology even in disaster. But then he looked up, and the apology died somewhere between his brain and his mouth. Isla Vaughn stood before him in a cream-colored power suit that somehow managed to look both authoritative and devastatingly feminine. Her auburn hair cascaded over her shoulders like spun copper, catching the fluorescent light. Her figure was the kind that turned heads in boardrooms and made men forget their prepared presentations. But it was her eyes that stopped. Cole culled a shade of green so vivid they looked almost unnatural, studying him with a mixture of amusement and something else, something that looked almost like recognition. She tilted her head, one perfectly shaped eyebrow arching upward in an expression that could have meant anything from curiosity to contempt. The words that came next carried the kind of quiet authority that made people actually listen instead of just hearing. "You have no idea who I am, do you?" Cole's brain finally caught up with the situation, horror flooding through his veins as the pieces assembled themselves into a nightmare of professional disaster. Isla Vaughn, the woman who was about to acquire 40% of his company. The woman who held the future of Harrison Logistics in her perfectly manicured hands. The woman who he now realized with mounting dread he had just body-checked in the hallway while looking like he'd never learned to dress himself. His hand extended automatically, corporate training overriding panic. "Ms. Vaughn, I'm Cole Harrison. I apologize for my daughter was having a rough morning and I..." She stepped closer, so close he could see the faint dusting of freckles across her nose that her makeup couldn't quite conceal, so close he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Her voice cut through his stammering with surgical precision. "Stop," and he did. Because when Isla Vaughn told you to stop, your body obeyed before your mind even processed the command. "You're going to strangle yourself at this rate." Before Cole could protest, before he could process what was happening, her hands were at his throat. Not aggressive, not threatening, but deliberate and steady as she began untangling the mess he'd made of the silk. She was close enough now that he could count her freckles, close enough to notice the way her lips pressed together in concentration as she worked, close enough to feel his heart hammering against his ribs like it was trying to escape his chest entirely. Those lips, perfectly shaped, touched with just a hint of color that made them look like rose petals in morning dew. He couldn't stop staring at them, couldn't stop wondering what they would feel like, couldn't stop his imagination from running wild in directions that had no place in a corporate corridor at 9 in the morning. Her fingers moved with practiced efficiency, loosening the knot, smoothing the fabric, rebuilding what he'd destroyed. The tie settled against his chest in a perfect Windsor, the kind he used to tie without thinking before his life fell apart. But she didn't step back. Her hands lingered on his collar, adjusting, perfecting, and when she looked up, her green eyes were darker than they'd been moments before. The words came out barely above a whisper, but they hit him like a physical force. "Stop staring at my lips like that. If you keep it up, I'll forget we're at work." The air between them crackled with something electric, something that had absolutely no place in a professional setting. Cole felt the years of carefully constructed walls threatening to crumble with a single touch from this woman he had only just met. His pulse thundered in his ears, drowning out the distant hum of office equipment and muffled conversations bleeding through closed doors. Then his phone rang, shattering the moment like glass against concrete. The screen showed Harper's daycare, and suddenly nothing else mattered. Not the merger, not the beautiful woman still standing too close for professional comfort, not the fact that his entire future hung in the balance. The world narrowed to that glowing screen and the sick certainty that something was wrong because the daycare never called unless something was wrong. The administrator's voice carried that particular blend of professionalism and concern that every parent learns to dread. Harper had fallen on the playground. Nothing serious, just a scraped knee and bruised pride, but she was asking for her daddy, crying, refusing to be comforted by anyone else. The same story that had played out a dozen times in the 2 years since Cassidy had walked out the door. The same impossible choice between being there for his daughter and being there for his responsibilities. Cole's throat tightened as the words formed, each one feeling like a confession of failure. "I have to go. My daughter, she needs me. Please tell the board I'll be there as soon as I can." I just... Isla's expression shifted, softened in a way that surprised him more than anything else that morning. The Ice Queen melted just enough to reveal something human underneath, something that understood the weight of what he was carrying. "I'll handle the board. Go be with your daughter. We'll reschedule." Cole stared at her, waiting for the catch, the condition, the subtle reminder that in the corporate world, family emergencies were weaknesses to be exploited. But none came. Isla Vaughn, the woman they called ruthless, simply nodded toward the elevator and turned away. He made it to the daycare in record time, his expensive shoes pounding against the sidewalk as he ran the last 2 blocks. Rational thought had abandoned him somewhere around the 3rd block, replaced by pure parental instinct and the primal need to reach his child. Harper sat in the nurse's office, her small face streaked with tears, a rainbow bandage wrapped around her knee like a badge of honor. The moment she saw him, she launched herself into his arms with a sob that broke something inside his chest. Her tiny fingers clutched his suit jacket like a lifeline, her voice muffled against his neck. "Daddy, I fell down and it hurt, and I wanted you and you weren't there." The words hit him harder than any corporate negotiation ever could. Every missed school event, every late pickup, every time he'd chosen conference calls over playground visits came flooding back in a wave of guilt so powerful it threatened to drown him. His voice came out rough, choked with emotion he couldn't quite contain. "I'm here now, baby girl. Daddy's here now. I've got you." He held her for a long time, letting her tears soak into his shirt, letting the world outside that small room fade into insignificance. This was what mattered. This tiny human being who depended on him for everything, who looked at him like he hung the moon and stars, who had no idea that sometimes her daddy felt like he was drowning in the weight of doing it all alone. When he finally looked up, his phone had accumulated 17 missed calls and 42 new emails. The merger meeting had been postponed indefinitely. His assistant had texted him 7 times in increasing states of panic, and there was one message from an unknown number that simply read, "Hope your daughter is okay." I Cole stared at that message for a long moment, something warm and unexpected blooming in his chest. In a world of corporate sharks and calculated moves, Isla Vaughn had done something genuinely kind. He saved her number without really thinking about why, without questioning the impulse that told him this moment mattered in ways he couldn't yet understand. 3 days passed before their rescheduled meeting. 3 days of Cole preparing himself for the corporate battle he knew was coming, building his defenses back up, reminding himself that Isla Vaughn's moment of kindness didn't change the fundamental nature of their relationship. She was here to acquire his company, to strip away pieces until only the profitable core remained, to make decisions based on spreadsheets and profit margins, rather than the 200 families who depended on Harrison Logistics for their livelihoods. The conference room was already occupied when he arrived precisely on time, carrying folders thick with projections and counteroffers. Isla sat at the head of the table, her hair pulled back in a severe bun that somehow made her look even more formidable. All business. No trace of the woman who'd tied his tie, who'd looked at him with something that might have been interest, who'd told him to go to his daughter without hesitation. The meeting unfolded exactly as he'd expected. Numbers flew across the table like weapons in a corporate war. Terms and conditions, percentages, and timelines, every clause dissected and debated with surgical precision. Isla was brilliant, pushing for better terms, demanding concessions, never giving an inch of ground she didn't have to surrender. His team sweated through their shirts, watching their CEO go toe-to-toe with a woman who'd made grown men cry in similar negotiations. But sometimes when their eyes met across the crowded room, Cole caught glimpses of something else beneath her polished exterior. Something that looked almost lonely. A flicker of recognition, as if she saw in him the same exhaustion she carried, the same weight of responsibility that turned sleep into a luxury and personal life into a distant memory. The meeting ended with handshakes and promises to reconvene next week. Professional, cordial, exactly what it should have been. Cole was already halfway to the elevator when her voice stopped him. "How's Harper?" He turned, surprised by the question, by the fact that she remembered his daughter's name. "She's good. Thank you for asking. And thank you for the other day." "You didn't have to do that." Isla's expression remained carefully neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. "Yes, I did." Silence stretched between them, heavy with words neither seemed willing to speak. Cole found himself studying her face, noticing the faint lines around her eyes that spoke of too many late nights, the subtle tension in her jaw that suggested stress carried deep. Coffee sometime. To discuss the merger terms, they both knew it wasn't about merger terms. The question hung in the air like a challenge, like a test, like the first move in a game neither of them knew how to play. Yeah, coffee. The cafe was one of those upscale places near her office, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs, where a simple cup of coffee cost more than most people's lunch. Cole arrived early, nervous in a way he hadn't been since his first date with Cassidy back in college. That relationship had started with coffee, too, he remembered. Started with promise and ended with her walking out on a 2-year-old child without looking back. Isla appeared exactly 5 minutes late, which would have been perfectly acceptable, except he'd done his research. Isla Vaughn was never late, ever. Her hair was down, flowing over her shoulders in waves that caught the afternoon light, and she traded the power suit for jeans and a simple blouse that made her look almost approachable, almost human. The beginning was awkward, both of them hiding behind corporate speak and merger terminology like it could protect them from whatever this was becoming. But gradually, inevitably, the conversation shifted. Isla asked about Harper with genuine interest, not the polite curiosity most people displayed. Cole found himself lighting up as he talked about his daughter, about the elaborate stories she invented for her stuffed animals, about her obsession with unicorns and pancakes, and the way she pronounced spaghetti like it was 3 separate words. "She asked me if you were a princess. The fancy suit, you know." Isla's laugh transformed her entire face, softening the sharp edges, revealing something warm underneath. "What did you tell her?" The words came out before he could stop them, honest in a way that felt dangerous. "I said, you're something better, a boss." Her smile widened, genuine and unguarded, and Cole realized he'd never seen her actually smile before. Not in photographs, not in the boardroom, nowhere. This was new territory, uncharted and terrifying. The conversation meandered through safer topics, music preferences, terrible movies they secretly loved, books that had changed their perspectives. Isla was funny when she let her guard down, quick-witted and sharp, in ways that had nothing to do with corporate maneuvering. Cole found himself laughing more than he had in years, the sound feeling foreign and wonderful in equal measure. Then she mentioned her father, just a passing reference, but something in her voice made him pay attention. He died at his desk when I was 23. His last words to his secretary were about the Beijing expansion. The pain underneath those words was so raw, it made Cole's chest ache. "I'm sorry." She shrugged, but the gesture was too studied, too practiced. It was a long time ago, ancient history. The silence that followed felt different than the earlier awkwardness. This was shared understanding, mutual recognition of loss and regret. Cole watched her trace absent patterns on the table, her fingers moving in loops and whirls that might have meant something or nothing at all. "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask. Doesn't mean I'll answer." "Why did you help me that day when Harper got hurt and I had to leave the meeting? You didn't have to cover for me. Most people in your position would have used it as leverage." Isla was quiet for so long, Cole thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, stripped of its usual corporate polish, raw, in a way that made his breath catch. "Because I watched my father miss every important moment of my childhood for board meetings and quarterly reports. Because when I saw you choose your daughter over everything else, I saw the father I wished I'd had." Something shifted in that moment, some fundamental realignment of how Cole saw this woman. Not the ice queen, not the ruthless negotiator, just Isla, tired and lonely and carrying her own weight of regret. His hand moved across the table without conscious thought, fingers closing around hers in a gesture of comfort that felt as natural as breathing. She didn't pull away. Her skin was soft and warm, and when she looked at him, there were tears glistening in her eyes that she was trying desperately not to let fall. The coffee that was supposed to last 30 minutes stretched into 2 hours. They talked about everything and nothing, the kind of conversation that felt like discovering a secret language only the two of them spoke. When they finally left, stepping out into the evening air that had turned crisp with approaching autumn, Isla touched his arm with a gentleness that made his heart stutter. "Same time next week." "It's a date." They both froze at the word, eyes meeting in mutual acknowledgement of what they'd just implied. Cole opened his mouth to backtrack to make it casual and meaningless, but Isla's smile stopped him. "I know what you meant." But she was still smiling when she turned away, and Cole found himself grinning like an idiot as he watched her disappear into the crowd. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of coffee meetings that turned into lunch meetings that turned into late dinners, supposedly about discussing quarterly reports. Cole knew they weren't fooling anyone, especially themselves. But acknowledging what this was becoming felt dangerous, like naming it might shatter the fragile thing growing between them. During one late-night working session in his office, Cole noticed the prescription bottles when Isla pulled them from her bag. Strong pain medication, the kind you didn't take for headaches. She caught him looking, quickly tucked them away with practiced efficiency. Chronic condition, nothing serious. But her face told a different story, one written in lines of pain and exhaustion she couldn't quite hide. Cole didn't push, but he filed the information away, another piece of the puzzle that was Isla Vaughn. Week 3 brought the first real physical contact beyond handshakes and accidental touches. They'd been working late in his office, papers spread across every available surface, arguing good-naturedly about projected growth rates. Sometime around midnight, Isla had fallen asleep on his couch, her body finally surrendering to the exhaustion she carried like armor. Cole covered her with his jacket, moving carefully to avoid waking her. She looked different, asleep, younger, more vulnerable, the sharp edges of her corporate persona softened into something almost fragile. He settled into his desk chair, content to let her rest, to guard this moment of peace she so clearly needed. She woke at 2 in the morning, disoriented and embarrassed. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's okay. You looked peaceful." Their faces were close, too close, the space between them charged with possibility. Cole felt gravity pulling him forward, toward those lips he'd been trying not to think about for 3 weeks. But Isla pulled back, creating distance that felt like miles. "I should go." Week 4 changed everything. Harper had a school play, one of those chaotic productions where 4-year-olds dressed as flowers recited lines they'd mostly forgotten. Cole mentioned it casually, not expecting anything, but Isla's response surprised him. "I'd love to see it, if that's Appropriate? Cole hesitated. Harper had already lost one mother. The thought of introducing someone new, of letting his daughter get attached only to watch another woman walk away, made his chest constrict with protective fear. But something in Isola's eyes, a genuine interest that went beyond polite curiosity, made him nod. She showed up to the play wearing jeans and a simple sweater, blending in with the other parents in a way that felt deliberately chosen. Harper played flower number 3 with enthusiastic dedication, delivering her 2 lines with such conviction that several parents laughed. But when Cole glanced at Isla, she was crying. Actually crying, tears streaming down her face as she watched a 4-year-old recite dialogue about growing in the sunshine. Afterward, Harper spotted Isla and approached with that particular mixture of shyness and curiosity that defined childhood. "You came, of course I came. I heard you were the best flower in the whole play." And just like that, something fundamental shifted. Isla started appearing at their Sunday pancake breakfast, initially awkward, but gradually finding her rhythm. She burned the first batch, laughed at herself with genuine amusement, and let Harper teach her the proper way to flip without destroying the structural integrity. She learned that crusts had to be cut off sandwiches, that foods could never touch on the plate, that the purple unicorn was named Sparkles and needed to be tucked in with proper ceremony. Cole watched them together, watched his daughter warm to this woman who'd never made pancakes before meeting them, watched Isla's careful defenses crumble in the face of childish enthusiasm. Something in his chest cracked open, some sealed place he'd thought would stay closed forever. The night Harper stayed with Eleanor Cole's mother, Isla came over for dinner that turned into wine, that turned into confessions whispered in the dark. They made love slowly, carefully, like they were both afraid of breaking something precious. Afterwards, she traced patterns on his chest, her fingers leaving trails of warmth. "I haven't felt this way in ever, actually." "Me too." She opened her mouth, closed, and it opened it again. "Cole, I need to tell you something." He waited patient, but she shook her head. "Never mind, another time." The next morning, over coffee and comfortable silence, Harper asked the question that changed everything. "Daddy, is Miss Isla going to be my new mommy?" Cole nearly choked, coffee burning his throat. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" "Because she does mommy things, and she looks at you like she loves you." His heart swelled and broke simultaneously, love and fear warring in his chest. "Would you want that? Want Miss Isla to be your mommy?" Harper considered this with the devastating logic of childhood. "I think so. She's nice, and she makes you smile." That night, after Harper was asleep, Cole opened his grandmother's jewelry box. The antique diamond ring inside had been in his family for 4 generations. His mother had worn it briefly before she'd walked away from her own family. Cassidy had never wanted it, preferring something modern and expensive, something that cost more than his first car. But when Cole pictured this ring, he saw it on Isla's hand, saw her wearing it while she charmed investors and dominated boardrooms, while she chased Harper around the living room, both of them breathless with laughter. He was going to ask her to marry him. The realization settled over him like a warm blanket, chasing away the cold that had lived in his chest since Cassidy left. He was going to ask Isla Vaughn to marry him, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't terrified of the answer. 3 floors below Cole's apartment, in an office that had been empty for months, a woman with honey-colored hair sat watching security footage on her laptop. Cassidy Blake's smile held no warmth as she observed her ex-husband kiss Isla Vaughn goodnight in the building's lobby. Her fingers moved across her phone's keyboard with practiced efficiency. "Found them." "Yeah, he's moved on. Some corporate bitch. No, I know what to do. Trust me." She ended the call and leaned back in the stolen chair, studying the frozen image of Cole's happy face. He looked different than she remembered. Lighter. Like some weight she'd placed on his shoulders had finally lifted. That weight was supposed to stay there, was supposed to keep him anchored to the memory of what they'd had, was supposed to prevent exactly this scenario. Cassidy had made mistakes. She knew that now, sitting in this empty office with $500,000 of gambling debt hanging over her head like a guillotine blade. Walking away from Harper had seemed like the right choice at the time, the only choice when motherhood felt like drowning and freedom looked like the only life raft. But freedom turned out to be just another word for alone, and alone had led her to poker tables and loan sharks and decisions that spiraled into desperation. She studied Isla's face on the screen, analyzing, calculating. Beautiful, successful, Everything Cassidy had convinced herself she wanted to be when she'd walked out on her family. But this woman had what Cassidy had thrown away, and that burned worse than any debt, worse than any threat from the men who'd fronted her money she couldn't repay. The plan formed slowly, methodically, each piece clicking into place with satisfying precision. She had access to things they didn't know about, connections from her time in corporate law before Harper was born. She knew people who could create documents, manipulate photos, build evidence out of nothing. Cole thought he'd moved on, thought he'd found something real with his Ice Queen. Cassidy would show him what real looked like, would remind him what happened when you tried to replace the irreplaceable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, her creditor's favorite messenger. "Time's up, Cassidy. Need something concrete by Friday or things get unpleasant." She typed back, "Friday, you'll have everything you need. Trust me." The laptop screen glowed in the darkness, casting shadows across Cassidy's face as she began her research. Every public record, every business transaction, every photograph of Isla Vaughn that existed in digital space became ammunition. She had 4 days to build a weapon capable of destroying what Cole and Isla were building. 4 days to prove that the past never really stays buried. Above her, completely unaware of the storm forming in his building's basement, Cole Harrison fell asleep with his phone still clutched in his hand, Isla's last text glowing on the screen. "Sweet dreams. See you tomorrow." Tomorrow would come. The storm would break. But tonight, for just a few more hours, Cole Harrison was allowed to be happy. Cole had chosen the restaurant, deliberately the same corner table where their first real date had unfolded 8 weeks earlier. The ring box pressed against his ribs, through his jacket pocket, a small weight that felt like it might crush his lungs. Harper was safely settled at Eleanor's house for the night, probably already asleep with Sparkles tucked under one arm. Everything was perfect. Maybe too perfect, in the way that things feel right before they shatter completely. Isla arrived wearing an emerald dress that matched her eyes, fabric clinging in ways that made coherent thought difficult. They ordered wine, fell into the easy banter that had become their language, reminisced about that terrible tie and the collision that started everything. Cole's hand kept drifting toward his pocket fingers, brushing the velvet box, his pulse climbing every time he came close to dropping to one knee. "I should mess up my ties more often." Her smile was devastating, unguarded in ways she never allowed during business hours. "Please don't. My heart can't take it." Cole reached for the box again, mouth opening to form words he'd rehearsed 100 times when his phone buzzed against the table. A text from an unknown number, just 7 words that turned his blood to ice. "Check your email now before you do something stupid." His hands shook as he opened the email, app thumb hesitating over the screen. Isla noticed the change immediately, her expression shifting from warm to concerned in the space of a heartbeat. "What's wrong?" The words stuck in his throat. "I need to check something. Give me a minute." The email subject line read, "The truth about Isla Vaughn." Below it, a series of attachments loaded with agonizing slowness, photographs, bank statements, document scans, emails. Each image that materialized felt like a punch to the gut. Isla with another man standing close outside what looked like a hotel. The timestamp read 3 months ago, right around when they'd first met. More photos followed showing dinners, business meetings, intimate conversations. The man's face was familiar from financial publications. Malcolm Sterling, tech billionaire. The kind of name that appeared in Forbes power lists and charity gala coverage. Then came the documents. Bank records showing large transfers from Vaughn Capital to shell corporations Cole had never heard of. Email chains discussing the merger, except these emails painted it as something else entirely. A hostile takeover. Deliberate asset stripping. The phrase "Carter takedown" appeared multiple times, cold and clinical as a surgeon's blade. His vision tunneled the restaurant, blurring at the edges until only the phone screen remained in focus. Every email, every transfer, every photograph built a narrative that made terrible sense. The Ice Queen of Wall Street playing the long game, using him to gain access to Harrison Logistics from the inside. The kindness, the vulnerability, the way she looked at Harper, all of it calculated, weaponized, designed to lower his defenses until she could strike. Cole's chest constricted as he looked up at Isla. Really looked at her, trying to reconcile the woman across from him with the evidence burning on his screen. She'd stopped mid-sip of her wine, the glass frozen halfway to her lips, reading the devastation on his face with those two green eyes. "Who is Malcolm Sterling, do you?" The question came out flat, emotionless, all the warmth he'd been carrying for weeks stripped away and replaced with something cold and hard. Isla blinked, confusion flickering across her features. My ex-fiancé. But that was 3 years ago. Why? Cole turned the phone around, let her see the photos, watched the color drain from her face as she scrolled through the evidence. Her fingers trembled slightly, the first crack in her usual composure he'd ever witnessed outside of private moments. This isn't what it looks like. Cole, I swear to you this is all fabricated. I haven't seen Malcolm in years. These emails are doctored. The bank records, how am I supposed to believe that the words tasted like ash in his mouth? You're telling me someone created this entire elaborate package of lies just to what? To make me doubt you. Her hands shot across the table, gripping his arm with surprising strength. Yes, think about it. Who benefits from us falling apart? Who would want to destroy both of us personally and professionally? Cole wanted to believe her. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to trust her, to remember all the moments they'd shared. The vulnerability she'd shown him, the way she looked at Harper like his daughter was something precious. But he'd trusted Cassidy too. He'd believed her promises, her declarations of love, her vows. And she'd walked away without looking back, leaving him to pick up the pieces of a life she'd shattered. The ring box in his pocket felt like a grenade now, something dangerous and explosive that could destroy everything if he made the wrong move. I need time. His voice came out rough, barely recognizable as his own. I need to think. I need to figure out what's true. Isla's face crumbled, all the careful control disintegrating in real time. Cole, please, don't do this. Don't shut me out. But he was already standing, already backing away from the table, from her, from the future he'd been imagining just moments before. I'll call you tomorrow. I can't do this right now. I'm sorry. He left her sitting there, tears streaming down her face into wine that cost more than most people's car payments. Left her surrounded by the ruins of their perfect evening. Left her holding pieces of evidence that might be real or might be lies. Left her with words unspoken and a ring she'd never see. The walk home took an eternity and no time at all. Cole's apartment felt too empty, too quiet, haunted by ghosts of the future he'd been building. He poured himself bourbon he didn't want, sat in darkness he couldn't escape, and pulled up the email again on his laptop, where the screen was bigger and the evidence even more damning. Every photo looked real. Every document bore the right letterheads, the right signatures, the right metadata. If this was fabricated, it was professional grade work, the kind that required resources and expertise beyond what most people could access. But if it was real, his phone buzzed, Isla probably, calling to explain, to beg, to try one more time to convince him. Cole let it go to voicemail, couldn't bear to hear her voice right now. Couldn't trust himself not to cave under the weight of his own desperate hope. The next 72 hours passed in a fog of functional depression. Cole went through the motions at work, signed documents without reading them, attended meetings where he contributed nothing of value. Harper asked about Miss Isla every single day, her small face falling each time he gave vague non-answers about being busy or having important work. Is she coming to my birthday party? I don't know, baby girl. The light in his daughter's eyes dimmed, and Cole hated himself for putting it there. Hated whoever had sent that email for forcing him into this position. Hated the universe for making love feel like a minefield, where every step might trigger an explosion. On day 2, he called Garrett Knox, a private investigator he'd used before when a supplier was suspected of fraud. Garrett came highly recommended by people who valued discretion and results over compassion and bedside manner. The investigator's office smelled like coffee and cigarettes, despite the prominent no smoking sign on the wall. Garrett himself looked exactly like his voice sounded on the phone, weathered, cynical, the kind of man who'd seen enough of humanity's dark side to develop permanent skepticism. Cole slid the envelope across the desk, everything printed and organized with the meticulous attention to detail that usually served him well in business. I need to know if these documents are real. And if they're not, I need to know who made them. Garrett flipped through the pages without comment, his expression never changing from professional neutrality. This will take some time. Digital forensics isn't instant. How much time? 48 hours for preliminary findings. Maybe less if I catch a break. Meanwhile, 3 floors above a coffee shop in downtown Manhattan, Isla Vaughn sat in her corner office and fought a losing battle against panic. Her head of security, a former FBI agent named Thomas Reeves, worked his network with quiet efficiency, tracing the anonymous email through layers of encryption and proxy servers. It's professional work, but not perfect. Whoever did this knows what they're doing, but they're not government-level sophisticated. Isla's fingers drummed against her desk, a nervous habit she usually suppressed. Can you find them? Given enough time, yes, but time is exactly what we don't have. The merger hung in the balance, not because of board concerns or financial projections, but because the man she'd fallen for thought she was playing him. Every instinct screamed at her to call Cole again, to show up at his door to make him listen. But she'd built an empire on strategic patience, on waiting for the right moment to strike, on never acting from desperation. Except this wasn't business. This was Cole and Harper, and the future Isla had started letting herself imagine, despite every promise she'd made to never be vulnerable again. On the morning of day 3, Garrett Knox called with preliminary findings. The photographs are real images, but the timestamps are fabricated. Metadata doesn't match. These were taken approximately 3.5 years ago, then digitally altered to appear recent. Cole's grip tightened on his phone, hope and dread warring in his chest. What about the emails? Still analyzing, but I found something else. Something you need to know about. What's your ex-wife, Cassidy Blake? She's in New York, has been for about 6 weeks, and she's been watching you. Everything clicked into place with sickening clarity. Of course it was Cassidy. Who else had the motive, the knowledge of his life, the capacity for destruction? Disguised as love, but why now? Why, after 2 years of silence, the answer came an hour later, buried in Garrett's more detailed report. Cassidy had gambling debts totaling just over $500,000 owed to people who didn't accept payment plans or negotiate interest rates. She'd burned through her trust fund, maxed out credit cards, exhausted every legal option. The kind of desperation that made people do terrible things. But the report contained something else, too. Something Garrett had uncovered while digging into the fabricated evidence. Medical records for Isla Vaughn pulled from the same hack that had yielded the fake emails. Stage 4 endometriosis, chronic pain management. Fertility prognosis, severely diminished potential for natural pregnancy, less than 15%. Cole stared at the medical terminology pieces falling into place. The pain medication. Her comment about almost having a daughter. The hesitation he'd sensed whenever Harper got too close. Isla had been hiding this, carrying it alone, probably terrified that he'd leave her, just like Malcolm Sterling apparently had when faced with the same truth. He checked the time, nearly midnight, and didn't care. Some conversations couldn't wait for morning, for proper timing, for the sun to rise on a world that made sense again. Isla's penthouse occupied the top floor of a building that probably cost more than Harrison Logistics was worth. Cole had never been here before, had deliberately kept their relationship away from her personal space, maintaining boundaries that now seemed absurd. The doorman recognized him from photos or security briefings, waved him through without question. She answered the door in yesterday's clothes, hair tangled, makeup smeared, looking nothing like the Ice Queen, and everything like a woman who'd been crying for 3 days straight. Her eyes widened when she saw him, surprise and hope and fear all tangled together in her expression. I know about the endometriosis. Isla froze, every muscle in her body going rigid. How did you? My investigator found medical records in the hack. The same hack that created the fake evidence. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. Is that why you're here, to tell me you don't want damaged goods? The bitterness in her voice cut deeper than anger ever could. Cole stepped forward, crossing the threshold uninvited, closing the door behind him with gentle finality. What? No, Bob, no, Isla, I'm here to apologize. She crumbled then, all the walls coming down at once. 3 days of holding herself together, shattering under the weight of those words. The Ice Queen of Wall Street dissolved into someone smaller, more fragile, more human than anyone got to see. Tears flowed freely now. Mascara tracking down her cheeks in dark rivers, her breath coming in hitching gasps that spoke of pain held too long. I was going to tell you, that night at dinner I was going to explain everything. About the condition, about Malcolm, about why I'm so terrified of this. Cole's arms went around her, automatically pulling her against his chest, feeling her shake with the force of emotions too big to contain. Why didn't you tell me before? Her voice came out muffled against his shirt. Because every man I've ever told has left. They want biological children, a perfect family, someone who isn't broken. The word hung between them, sharp and ugly, and so completely wrong that Cole had to physically pull back to look at her face. I already have a perfect family, Harper, and I want you in it. Fresh tears spilled over, but these looked different. Less despair, more disbelief, like she couldn't quite process what he was saying. Isla's story came out in fragments, pieces of a past she'd kept locked away. Malcolm Sterling had proposed after 2 years together, had talked about children and legacy and building an empire together. Then she told him about the endometriosis, about the scarring and the pain and the statistical improbability of natural conception. He'd left within a week citing incompatibility and different life goals, but really just saying she was defective without using the actual word. That's when the ice formed. That's when she'd thrown herself into work, building Vaughn Capital into something so powerful that no one could hurt her, so imposing that vulnerability became impossible. Until Cole crashed into her in that hallway, unable to tie his own tie, looking lost and overwhelmed and completely genuine. I should have trusted you. Cole's voice came out rough with regret. I should have known. You had every right to doubt. The evidence looked real. I would have doubted too, but I know you. I know your heart. Isla's laugh held no humor. Do you? Because I'm still learning how to use it. Cole cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away tears that kept falling despite her best efforts. Then let me teach you. The kiss was different this time. Not tentative like their first, not playful like the ones that followed, but desperate and claiming and apologizing all at once. Isla kissed him back like he was oxygen, and she'd been drowning like 3 days apart, had been 3 years, like she was trying to memorize the taste and feel and reality of him before it could disappear again. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring box that had been burning a hole there for days. Isla's eyes went wide, and her hand flying to her mouth. I was going to ask you that night, at the restaurant, before the email, before the doubts, before everything fell apart. He dropped to one knee right there in her penthouse foyer, surrounded by modern art and floor-to-ceiling windows showing Manhattan's glittering skyline. The ring caught the city lights throwing prisms across her face. Isla Vaughn, will you marry me? Will you be Harper's mother? Will you build a life with us, whatever that life looks like? The tears came harder now, but she was nodding, trying to form words around the sobs. Yes, God, yes, yes to all of it. The ring slid onto her finger perfectly, like it had been made for her hand, like it had been waiting generations for exactly this moment. Isla stared at it through tears, turning her hand to watch the diamond catch the light. I can't give you more children. I can't give Harper siblings. The doctor said. Cole pulled her down onto the floor beside him, both of them kneeling in the entryway like supplicants at an altar. I don't care. Harper has enough love in her heart for an army, and so do I. They sat there for a long time holding each other, letting the reality of the moment sink in. Engaged, building a future, choosing each other despite every reason the universe had given them to walk away. Then Cole's phone rang. Eleanor's number flashing on the screen sent ice through his veins. His mother never called this late unless something was catastrophically wrong. He answered with hands that had started shaking before he even heard her voice. Daniel, you need to come home. Now, what happened? Her voice cracked, years of maternal strength fracturing under stress. It's Harper. Cassidy took her. The world stopped. Sound disappeared, replaced by a high-pitched ringing that might have been his pulse or might have been reality breaking. His mother's voice continued, explaining how she'd only stepped inside for a moment, how Harper had been playing in the backyard, how she'd found the note Cassidy left behind. Cole's hand clenched around the phone hard enough that the case creaked. What note? You took my life. Now I'm taking what's mine. Come alone to the address below. Tonight, or you'll never see her again. The address was some warehouse in the industrial district, the kind of location that showed up in crime dramas right before someone died. Classic movie villain territory, except this was his daughter, his Harper, his whole world concentrated in one small body that trusted him to keep her safe. Isla grabbed his arm, reading the devastation on his face. What happened? He could barely form the words. Cassidy took Harper. She wants me to come alone to some warehouse. If I don't, her expression transformed. Ice Queen, returning in full force but directed outward, now weaponized protection instead of defensive armor. If we call the police, Cassidy might panic, might hurt Harper. The "we" didn't escape his notice. Cole had been prepared to do this alone, to face his ex-wife and whatever trap she'd laid, because that's what the note demanded. But Isla wasn't asking permission, wasn't offering help as a favor. She was stating facts, making plans, becoming the strategist that made her feared in boardrooms. I'll go in, negotiate, buy time. Isla's eyes flashed with something fierce. And I'll get Harper out the back way. It's dangerous. Cassidy is desperate, and that little girl asked me last week if I was going to be her mommy. I said maybe someday. Well, someday is today, and mommies don't abandon their kids. Something shifted in Isla, then some fundamental transformation from the woman who burned pancakes and cried at school plays into something harder, more determined, more capable of violence if that's what protecting Harper required. She pulled out her phone, fingers moving with practiced efficiency. Within 20 minutes, a team assembled in Isla's living room. Thomas Reeves brought tactical equipment in a grim expression that suggested he'd done this before. Declan Cross, her ex-Navy SEAL bodyguard, arrived with gear that was definitely not legal in New York City. Garrett Knox showed up unbidden, claiming he had been monitoring Cassidy's movements and knew something was wrong. The warehouse squatted in the industrial district, like a tomb, all broken windows and rust-stained metal. Single bulb lighting spilled through cracks in the loading bay door, casting jagged shadows across cracked pavement. Cole's Mercedes looked absurdly out of place here, gleaming paint and leather seats surrounded by urban decay. He went in through the front, as planned, hands visible, weaponless, except for desperation and love. The interior smelled like oil and abandonment, years of disuse creating an atmosphere that felt post-apocalyptic. Harper sat on a folding chair in the center of the space duct tape, loose around her wrists, loose enough that Cole knew Cassidy hadn't really wanted to hurt her, just scare her. His daughter's eyes went wide when she saw him, tears already streaming down her small face. Daddy, the word echoed through empty space, bouncing off metal walls and concrete floors. Cole's heart threatened to break free from his chest, every instinct screaming at him to run to her, to grab her, and run, and never stop running. But Cassidy stepped from the shadows, and he forced himself to stop, to wait, to play whatever game this was. She looked different than he remembered. Thinner, harder. The honey-colored hair was the same, but everything else had changed in 2 years. Stress had carved lines around her eyes, and something hunted lived in her expression, the look of someone backed into a corner with no good options remaining. You look good, Daniel. Success suits you. Her voice carried echoes of the woman he'd married, but twisted now, bitter with regret and resentment in equal measure. Cole kept his hands where she could see them, kept his voice calm despite the chaos raging inside. Let her go, Cass. This is between us. Is it because from where I'm sitting, this is about her, about what I walked away from, about what I want back? The truth spilled out in fragments, confessions mixed with justifications, mixed with genuine pain. The gambling debts, $500,000 to people who made loan sharks look friendly. The downward spiral after she'd left freedom, turning into isolation, turning into desperation. She'd thought she wanted to be rid of the burden of family, but freedom was just loneliness with better marketing. I made a mistake, Dan. I was young, scared, selfish. You can't kidnap your way back into her life. Cassidy's laugh held hysteria at its edges. Watch me. Either you pay off my debts and let me back in, or what, you'll hurt her, your own daughter. Her face crumpled, the gun in her hands shaking as control slipped. No, God, no. I could never. Then put the gun down. Isla's voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. She emerged from the shadows behind Cassidy, calm, and controlled the Ice Queen in full effect. Declan and Thomas flanked her, moving with military precision, cutting off escape routes with professional efficiency. Cassidy whirled, guns swinging toward this new threat. You're the reason for all this. The replacement, the upgrade. Isla didn't flinch, didn't show fear, didn't give Cassidy anything to work with. No. You're the reason. You left. You made choices. Own them. The gun rose, pointing at Isla's chest, and Cole's world narrowed to that small circle of metal. But before he could move, before anyone could react, Harper's voice cut through everything. Stop. Stop it. I hate this. Everyone froze. Harper's tears flowed freely, now her small body shaking with the force of emotions too big for a 4-year-old to process. Her words came out choked but clear, carrying the weight of truth that only children can deliver without filter. I don't want a mommy who points guns. I don't want a mommy who left me. I want Miss Isla. She makes me pancakes and reads me stories and doesn't scare me. The final words hit like physical blows, each one driving nails into Cassidy's resolve. You're not my mommy anymore. Miss Isla is. The gun dropped from nerveless fingers, clattering against concrete with terrible finality. Cassidy sank to her knees, everything that had been holding her together collapsing under the weight of her daughter's rejection. Sobs racked her body, raw and ugly and completely genuine. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I just wanted, I don't even know what I wanted. Thomas and Declan moved in immediately, securing the weapon, securing Cassidy doing their jobs with professional detachment. But Isla ignored them, running to Harper, untying the duct tape with shaking hands, pulling the little girl into her arms with fierce protectiveness. Harper buried her face in Isla's shoulder, tiny hands clutching at expensive fabric like it was the only solid thing in a collapsing world. I want to go home, Mommy. The word hung in the air, transforming everything. Isla's eyes met Cole's over Harper's head, tears streaming down her face now. All the ice melted away, leaving only the woman underneath. Okay, baby, we're going home. Garrett had called the police despite instructions, otherwise deciding that some situations required official intervention regardless of what civilians wanted. Detective Martinez arrived with backup taking statements, securing evidence, reading Cassidy her rights in that flat, professional tone that turned human tragedy into legal process. As they led Cassidy away in handcuffs, she looked back at Cole one final time. The hatred was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like relief. Take care of her. Take care of my little girl. Be the parent I couldn't be. Cole nodded, unable to form words, watching his ex-wife disappear into a police cruiser that would take her to jail, to trial, to consequences that had been building since the moment she'd walked out on her family. That night, Harper slept between Cole and Isla in Cole's king-size bed, small body curled into Isla's side like she belonged there. Isla stroked the child's hair with gentle repetition, the engagement ring catching lamplight with every pass. She called you Mommy? Isla's voice cracked around the words. I know. Is that okay? Cole leaned over to kiss her forehead, tasting salt from tears she couldn't stop. That's everything. Morning came with watery sunlight and Harper's quiet questions over breakfast. She was subdued but not traumatized, resilient in the way children can be when they feel safe again. The conversation about what had happened, about what came next, unfolded gently. Miss Isla, yes. Sweetheart, you're not gonna leave, right? Like her, Ola knelt down to Harper's level, taking small hands in hers, making eye contact in that way adults do when they need children to really hear them. Harper, I need you to listen carefully. I love your daddy, and I love you so much, and I'm going to marry your daddy, which means I'm going to be your mommy forever and ever, even when I'm bad, even when you're bad, even when I'm bad, even when daddy's bad. Harper giggled despite herself. That's a lot of bad. Good thing love is bigger than bad. Later that afternoon, after Harper had been distracted by cartoons and coloring books, Isla's phone rang with a number she recognized immediately. Her fertility specialist, Dr. Amanda Chen, calling about the experimental treatment they'd discussed months ago. Cole only caught fragments of the conversation, medical terminology and percentages and cautious optimism. When Isla hung up, she looked dazed, like someone had just offered her something she'd stopped believing in. There's a new procedure for endometriosis. Still experimental, but the early results are promising. It might improve chances of pregnancy, might not. Cole studied her face, reading hope and fear in equal measure. Do you want to try? Isla looked through the doorway to where Harper was sprawled on the living room floor, tongue poking out in concentration as she colored a unicorn with aggressive enthusiasm. I already have a daughter, that's enough. But if there's a chance, she turned back to him, vulnerability written across every feature. Then we'll try. Together. The word felt like a promise, like a foundation, like the beginning of something neither of them had believed possible 6 months ago. Together. Not alone, not carrying weight in isolation. Together. 6 weeks crawled by before Cassidy Blake stood in a Manhattan courtroom orange jumpsuit, replacing the designer clothes she'd once worn like armor. The charges read like a catalog of desperation. Kidnapping, extortion, unlawful possession of a firearm. Her lawyer, a public defender who looked barely old enough to vote, negotiated a plea deal that spared everyone the trauma of a trial. The judge, a severe woman in her 60s named Patricia Wolfe, studied Cassidy with an expression that suggested she'd seen this story play out too many times. 5 years eligible for parole in 3, court-mandated psychiatric treatment, permanent restraining order, prohibiting contact with Harper Harrison. Cole sat in the gallery, Isla's hand warm in his, watching his ex-wife accept responsibility for crimes born from choices made years earlier. Part of him wanted maximum punishment, wanted her to suffer the way he'd suffered that night in the warehouse. But the larger part, the part that remembered the woman he'd loved before everything broke, felt only exhaustion. She's sick. She needs help, not revenge. Isla squeezed his fingers, understanding written in the gesture. The Ice Queen everyone feared had learned warmth in small increments, thawing one moment at a time. Harper's recovery required professional intervention. Rebecca Sullivan's office occupied the 3rd floor of a brownstone in Park Slope, decorated with primary colors and toys strategically placed to encourage play therapy. The psychologist herself radiated calm competence, the kind of presence that made frightened children feel safe and anxious parents feel heard. The sessions unfolded weekly, Harper drawing pictures that evolved from dark scribbles to recognizable shapes. The first few showed 3 stick figures, Daddy Miss Isla herself. No representation of Cassidy appeared anywhere, as if Harper's mind had simply erased the woman who'd given birth to her. Dr. Sullivan reviewed the artwork with careful attention during parent consultations. She's resilient. Children often are when they have stable support systems. The kidnapping was traumatic, but she's processing it healthily. Will there be long-term effects? The psychologist's honesty was refreshing rather than alarming. Probably. Trust issues, separation anxiety, those are common. But with 2 parents who love her, she'll be more than okay. Cole and Isla attended their own therapy sessions twice a week, working through trust issues that ran deeper than Cassidy's interference. Learning to communicate without defensive armor required dismantling habits built over decades. Cole's abandonment fears didn't vanish because Isla wore his grandmother's ring. Isla's terror of inadequacy couldn't be erased by Harper calling her mommy. Their therapist, Dr. Marcus Penn, specialized in blended families and second chances. Progress came in increments measured by difficult conversations and vulnerable admissions. The work was exhausting, unglamorous, nothing like the romantic montages in movies where love conquered all obstacles through sheer force of feeling. But slowly, painfully, they learned. Cole learned to voice fears instead of retreating into silence. Isla learned that being needed wasn't the same as being used. Together, they built something more durable than passion. They built partnership. The Harrison-Vaughn merger finalized 3 months after the warehouse incident, becoming official in a conference room filled with lawyers and accountants who cared more about quarterly projections than human drama. They maintained separate offices, establishing professional boundaries that kept board members from questioning whether personal relationships compromised business judgment. The numbers didn't lie. Together, they were formidable. Harrison Logistics brought operational expertise and loyal client relationships. Vaughn Capital brought financial resources and strategic vision. The combination created something worth more than the sum of its parts, much like the relationship that had spawned it. Eleanor Harrison took the engagement news with surprising grace given her son's track record. She'd watched Cassidy destroy Cole, had picked up pieces when he'd shattered, had raised Harper when her son couldn't function. But watching Isla with her granddaughter melted reservations like spring snow. That woman loves you both. Don't let her go. The wedding planning descended into beautiful chaos the moment Harper learned she'd be Flower Girl. Opinions erupted from her small body with volcanic enthusiasm, each one delivered with the absolute certainty that only 4-year-olds possess. The flowers have to be purple and pink, and maybe rainbow if that's allowed. Cole and Isla exchanged glances across the kitchen table, both fighting smiles. Harper sat between them, hands gesturing wildly as she outlined her vision. Can Sparkles be the ring bearer? I know he's a stuffed unicorn, but he's very responsible. Isla's attempt at seriousness lasted approximately 3 seconds before laughter broke through. I think Sparkles might be better suited to supervising from the audience. Harper considered this with theatrical gravity. Okay, but he needs a good seat. Front row. The dress shopping expedition transformed into a bonding experience Eleanor had been orchestrating since the engagement. She drove them to a bridal boutique in Greenwich Village, the kind of place where champagne flowed freely and consultants treated every bride like royalty. The first several gowns were beautiful in that generic bridal way with all lace and tulle and traditional elegance that looked like every other wedding dress in existence. Isla tried them dutifully, standing on pedestals while consultants pinned and adjusted, but her reflection showed someone playing dress-up rather than preparing for her actual future. You look like you're going to a corporate merger. Eleanor's assessment landed with perfect accuracy. Isla studied herself in the mirror, recognizing the disconnect between the image and the reality. This wasn't her. None of it was her. Harper tugged on the consultant's sleeve with the persistence of youth. She needs to look like a princess with sparkles. The dress they finally found balanced elegance with whimsy, simple lines that flowed like water, with just enough crystal beading to catch light without overwhelming. Isla turned in front of the three-way mirror, watching fabric move around her legs, and something clicked into place. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears she didn't bother hiding. You're going to be such a beautiful bride, and an even better daughter-in-law. Thank you for loving my son. The gratitude in her voice carried weight beyond words. Thank you for loving my granddaughter, like she's your own. Cole's bachelor party consisted of a baseball game with his closest friends, men who'd stuck around through the Cassidy disaster and never stopped showing up. They occupied a private box at Yankee Stadium, drinking beer and eating overpriced hot dogs while pretending to pay attention to the game. His best friend since college, Jake Morrison, studied Cole with the familiarity of 20 years. You sure about this? More sure than I've ever been about anything. Even more than when you married Cassidy. The question held no judgment, just genuine curiosity. Cole watched a batter strike out before answering. That wasn't sure. That was desperate. I thought if I just tried hard enough, loved enough, it would work. This is different. How Cole searched for words adequate to the feeling. With Cassidy, I was trying to be what she needed. With Isla, I get to be myself. And somehow that's enough. Meanwhile, Isla's bachelorette party unfolded in her penthouse with a carefully curated group of women who'd seen her evolution from ice queen to something warmer. Her college roommate, now a successful architect, raised a glass of champagne with theatrical flourish. We've literally never seen you like this. Like what? Relaxed, happy, human if we're being honest. Isla laughed to sound genuine and unguarded. Thanks. But seriously, you're glowing. That's what love does, I guess. The wedding morning arrived with September sunshine and unseasonably perfect weather, as if nature itself had decided to cooperate. Cole helped Harper into her flower girl dress purple, with strategic sparkle placement exactly as specified while trying to manage his own nerves. Daddy, are you scared a little? Are you? Harper shook her head with certainty that made his heart ache. Nope, I'm excited. We're getting a mommy. The words hit him like physical force, joy and grief tangled together in ways he couldn't untangle. Yeah, baby girl, we are. Isla's preparation happened 3 blocks away in Eleanor's guest room, the older woman helping with buttons and adjustments while offering wisdom accumulated over decades. Your mother would be so proud. Isla's mother had died when she was 8, cancer stealing her before Isla could form lasting memories. The ache of that absence, never fully healed, just became something she carried. I wish she was here. Eleanor's hand stilled on the zipper. She is, in your heart, and in Harper's smile when she looks at you. The garden behind Cole's new house, larger than his apartment, purchased specifically for their growing family, had been transformed into something magical. White chairs arranged in neat rows, flowers everywhere in the purple-pink rainbow spectrum. Harper had demanded string quartet playing Pachelbel with professional precision. 50 guests gathered as afternoon light turned golden, intimate, and perfect. Harper walked down the aisle, first scattering petals with such enthusiastic abandon that several landed in guests' hair. Laughter rippled through the audience, warm and genuine, the kind of joy that made moments memorable. Then Isla appeared, and Cole forgot how to breathe. She moved toward him like he was magnetic north, and she was a compass designed to find him, her dress catching light, with every step her face radiant with emotions she'd spent years learning to show. The auburn hair flowed free over her shoulders, no corporate severity, just Isla being completely herself. When she reached him, their hands met automatically, fingers interlocking with practiced ease. The officiant began the ceremony, but Cole barely heard the words. Everything narrowed to Isla's face, her eyes, the slight tremor in her fingers that matched his own. The vows they'd written separately came out simultaneously, each word carrying weight accumulated over months of loving and learning and choosing each other despite every obstacle. Cole spoke first, his voice steady, despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm. I love all. I was lost before I met you. Not in a dramatic movie-type way. In a slow, forgetting how to live kind of way. I was so busy surviving, I forgot to actually live. You reminded me what it means to laugh until my stomach hurts. To stay up too late talking about nothing and everything. To believe that broken hearts can heal. To trust again. He paused, gathering courage for the next part. You taught me that family isn't just blood, it's choice. Every day, you choose us. Harper and me. So today I'm choosing you. Forever. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real. The promises flowed like water, finding its course. I promise to fix your coffee the way you like it. To never judge your terrible taste in reality TV. To hold you when the endometriosis pain gets bad. To be your partner in business and in life. To love Harper with everything I have. And to build a life with you that's worth living. I choose you, Isla. Today, tomorrow, and all the days after. Isla's turn came with tears already streaming down her face. Mascara be damned. Her voice cracked on the first words, but strengthened as she continued. Cole Harrison, I didn't believe in love before you. I mean, I believed it existed for other people. People who were softer than me, less broken, less complicated. You proved me wrong. She gripped his hands tighter, anchor in emotional turbulence. You saw past the Ice Queen, past the walls, past the fear. You saw me, the real me, the one who burns pancakes and cries at kids' school plays and has no idea what she's doing half the time. You loved that person. Even more impossibly, Harper loved that person too. The next part came out quieter, more vulnerable. I never thought I'd be a mother. Biology seemed to make that choice for me. But Harper taught me that being a mother isn't about biology. It's about showing up. It's about cutting crusts off sandwiches. It's about 2 a.m. nightmare comfort. It's about being there every day no matter what. Her voice strengthened again, carrying conviction that resonated through the garden. So today I'm vowing to show up. For you, for Harper, for our family. I promise to never stop fighting for us. To communicate even when it's hard. To trust you even when I'm scared. To love Harper with everything I have. I promise that our family, however it grows, whatever shape it takes, will be built on love, not biology. I choose you, Cole. I choose Harper. I choose us. Forever, the officiant opened his mouth to continue the ceremony, but Harper tugged on Isla's dress with the insistence of someone who had something important to contribute. Whispered words carried just far enough for the front rows to hear. I have vows too. Cole and Isla exchanged glances of surprise and delight, neither having planned for this moment. But Harper stood between them, small and serious, directing her words at Isla with 4-year-old sincerity. I'm little, so I don't know big words. But I love you, Miss Isla. I mean, Mommy, you make Daddy happy, and you make me happy, and you do Mommy things. She paused for breath, then continued with solemn determination. So I promise to be a good girl. Mostly. And to love you forever and ever, even when I'm in trouble. Not a single dry eye remained in the garden. Eleanor sobbed openly into tissues she'd wisely brought in bulk. Jake wiped at his face with the back of his hand. Even the string quartet looked misty. The kiss, when it finally came, tasted like salt and joy and promises kept. Harper cheered so loudly several birds fled from nearby trees, her enthusiasm infectious enough that soon the entire garden erupted in applause. The reception flowed seamlessly from ceremony guests moving to tables arranged under string lights that would glow once sunset arrived. But the moment that would become family legend happened during the traditional father-daughter dance. Except it wasn't just father-daughter. Cole scooped Harper up, setting her small feet on top of his shoes while Isla's hand found his shoulder, her other arm circling around Harper's back. The three of them swayed together as Somewhere Over the Rainbow played a family unit complete in choosing each other. Harper sang along off-key, her voice carrying pure joy. Isla rested her head against Cole's shoulder, engagement ring, catching light with every movement. Cole held them both, these two females who'd somehow become his entire world, and thought about how close he'd come to missing this. The photographer captured the moment from multiple angles, preserving it for future years, when Harper would need reminding that she'd always been chosen, always been wanted, always been loved. Later, much later, after cake and dancing and toasts that made everyone laugh and cry in equal measure, Cole and Isla collapsed into the back of the town car, taking them to their hotel. Harper had already departed with Eleanor, probably asleep before they had even left the reception. Mrs. Harrison. Isla smiled, testing the name on her tongue. It sounds strange. Good strange or bad strange? Good. Definitely good. They'd planned 2 weeks in Italy, a honeymoon that involved ancient architecture and wine country, and absolutely no children. The tickets were booked, hotels reserved, itinerary meticulously organized by Eleanor, who'd insisted they needed proper alone time. But the morning they were supposed to leave for JFK, Harper clung to Isla's legs with the desperation of someone convinced abandonment was imminent. Don't leave me. Please don't leave me. The kidnapping trauma surfaced in waves, usually triggered by transitions or separations. Sullivan had warned them about this, about how fear didn't follow logical timelines or convenient schedules. Cole and Isla locked eyes over Harper's head, entire conversations happening in silence. The decision formed without words, mutual understanding replacing discussion. 2 hours later, they stood in Eleanor's living room explaining the change of plans. Italy became Orlando. Romantic vineyard dinners became character breakfasts. Architectural tours became theme park rides. You can't bring a child on your honeymoon. Eleanor's protest lacked conviction, her eyes already soft with understanding. Isla smiled. Harper attached to her hip like a barnacle. Why not? She's part of this marriage. Magic Kingdom turned out to be exactly what they needed. Low stakes, high joy, focused entirely on making a small girl believe in magic again. Harper met Cinderella and burst into excited explanation about her new mommy, pointing at Isla with pride that made strangers smile. That's her. Isn't she beautiful? The princess, really, a theater major from Michigan, working her way through grad school, played her role perfectly. Almost as beautiful as you, princess. They watched fireworks over the castle that night, Harper sandwiched between them, holding both their hands. This is the best day of my whole life. Cole met Isla's gaze over Harper's head, mouthing words that didn't need sound. I love you. She mouthed back, I love you more. Harper, somehow sensing the exchange, squeezed both hands. I love you both the most. 3 months after returning from Orlando, Dr. Amanda Chen called about the experimental endometriosis treatment. Clinical trials showed 60% success rates for improving fertility, though success meant different things depending on severity of scarring. The procedure itself was outpatient laparoscopic surgery followed by 8 weeks of hormone therapy. Risks included infection, adverse reactions, possibility of worsening symptoms instead of improving some. No guarantees, just hope backed by preliminary data. What do you want to do? Isla watched Harper through the kitchen window, playing in the backyard with sparkles in an elaborate story involving unicorn kingdoms. I want to try, not because Harper isn't enough. She is, but because I want to give you a biological child, if I can. Cole's throat tightened. Isla, I don't need, I know, but I want to, for me, to prove I can. The surgery happened on a Tuesday morning in November, leaves turning gold outside the hospital windows. Cole held her hand until they wheeled her back, then paced the waiting room like an expectant father in a 1950s film. Eleanor had Harper probably spoiling her with ice cream and unlimited screen time. Recovery took 6 weeks of pain that made the condition's regular flare-ups look mild by comparison. Hormone injections, daily side effects ranging from mood swings to nausea to exhaustion that felt like gravity had tripled. Isla endured it with the same determination she brought to hostile takeovers, but some days the mask slipped. Harper didn't understand why mommy was sick, blamed herself with the magical thinking of childhood. Did I make her sick? Cole knelt to Harper's level hands on small shoulders. No, baby. Mommy's body is just working very hard right now, working on something special, working on what the answer had to wait. No point raising hopes that might shatter. 8 weeks post-procedure, Dr. Chen cleared Isla for pregnancy testing. The window for optimal conception was small, but real better odds than she'd had in a decade. They could try naturally or pursue IVF, the choice was theirs. Isla sat in their bathroom at dawn, pregnancy test unopened on the counter, paralyzed by possibility. Cole found her there 15 minutes later, still frozen. Together. We do this together. His hand covered hers on the box. They opened it together, read instructions together, waited 3 eternal minutes together, staring at a small window that would determine their future. 2 lines appeared faint but unmistakable. Isla stared, not breathing, not moving, not quite believing what her eyes reported. Is that real? Is it actually real? Cole checked the instructions again, compared the test to the diagram, confirmed what seemed impossible. It's real. The tears came in waves, overwhelming and cathartic. Not sad tears, not scared tears, but something bigger than either gratitude and disbelief and terror and joy, all tangled into something that didn't have adequate words. What if I lose it? What if something goes wrong? What if, then we'll deal with it together. They told Harper at 12 weeks after the first trimester passed and statistics shifted more favorably. Dinner at their dining table, just the three of them, the moment feeling monumental enough to require ceremony. Harper, we have something to tell you. Immediate concern flooded her small face. Am I in trouble? No, baby. The opposite. You're going to be a big sister. Eyes went saucer wide, mouth dropping open. A baby. Yes, Mommy has a baby growing in her belly. Harper processed this information with visible concentration. Like I was in my birth mommy's belly. The mention of Cassidy created momentary tension, but they'd been preparing for this conversation with Dr. Sullivan's guidance. That's right. But you're still our first baby. Forever. And you'll love the new baby too. We'll love you both. So much. Harper considered this seriously. Okay, but I get to teach the baby stuff, right? Their laughter broke the tension, joy spilling over into tickles and hugs and celebration that felt like its own kind of magic. 18 months later, the Harrison house existed in beautiful chaos. Rowan and Quinn, fraternal twins, had just turned 18 months old, walking, babbling, destroying everything within reach with the efficient enthusiasm of toddlers. Harper, now 6 and in first grade, took her big sister responsibilities with adorable seriousness. Sunday morning found Cole attempting pancakes while Isla chased Rowan, who'd somehow gotten syrup in her auburn hair that perfectly matched her mother's. Quinn threw Cheerios at the family dog with scientific precision, testing gravity's consistency. Harper sat cross-legged on the floor reading a picture book to both twins, who ignored her completely in favor of their respective chaos. And then the princess married the prince, and they had lots of babies. Isla caught Cole's eye across the kitchen, both of them fighting smiles. Lots of babies indeed. Harper's 7th birthday party that afternoon transformed their backyard into controlled pandemonium. Bounce house face painting, 24 children hopped up on sugar and excitement. Cole watched Isla manage the chaos while simultaneously preventing Quinn from eating chalk and Rowan from climbing the fence. She wore grass stains and baby drool like badges of honor, hair escaping its ponytail, makeup long gone exhausted and perfect. Harper launched herself at him with typical enthusiasm. Daddy, Mommy says if you don't stop staring at her like that, she's going to forget we're having a party. Cole scooped up all 3 kids, Harper, Rowan, Quinn, in an embrace that left everyone shrieking with delight. Over their heads, he caught Isla's gaze. She smiled, that particular smile reserved only for him, the one that said despite everything, despite the exhaustion and chaos and constant noise, she wouldn't change a single thing. He mouthed words across the yard, I love you. She mouthed back, I know. Evening found them collapsed on the couch, kids finally asleep, house destroyed in ways that would require hours to rectify. Neither of them moved, too exhausted to care about scattered toys and frosting ground into carpet. We did good today. Isla's voice carried satisfaction earned through survival. Cole pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her shampoo mixed with baby powder and birthday cake. We do good every day. Even when Rowan finger-painted the dog, especially then. Comfortable silence settled over them, the kind that only came from years of choosing each other through difficulties that would have broken weaker foundations. Isla traced patterns on his chest, a habit from their earliest days together. Do you remember that day in the elevator when you crashed into me and couldn't tie your tie? How could I forget? I thought you were going to fire me on the spot. Her laugh vibrated against his chest. I thought you were the most beautiful disaster I'd ever seen. And now you're my beautiful disaster. Forever. The professional photograph on the mantel showed 5 people. Cole, Isla, Harper, Rowan, Quinn, everyone smiling, everyone loved, everyone chosen. This was what second chances looked like when people were brave enough to take them. This was what healing looked like when given time and patience and determination. This was what family looked like when built on choice instead of obligation. Harper's bedtime that night came with the usual routine pajamas, teeth brushing, sparkles tucked in, with proper ceremony. But as Cole pulled her covers up, she asked a question that landed like a stone in still water. "Daddy, do you remember my birth, Mom?" Careful territory mapped extensively in therapy. "A little. Why do you ask? I don't really remember her." "Is that bad?" His hand found her hair stroking gently. "No, sweetheart. It's not bad at all. Sometimes I try to remember, but all I remember is being so. And now I remember pancakes and birthday parties and Mommy Isla's hugs. Those are good memories." "Yes, they are." She yawned, eyes already drifting closed. "Daddy, yeah, baby girl, thank you for finding Mommy Isla. We needed her." The words cracked something in Cole's chest, gratitude and grief mixing into emotion too complex for naming. "Yeah, we did." Isla appeared in the doorway just as Harper's breathing evened into sleep. She'd been listening, tears tracking down her face in the dim hallway light. Cole extended his hand, and she took it, moving into the room to kiss Harper's forehead with the gentle reverence of someone who understood what a gift this was. They left together, turning off the light, but leaving the door cracked, nightlight casting stars across the ceiling. The house settled around them, creaking and breathing like a living thing full of people they'd chosen and who'd chosen them back. Outside, the Manhattan skyline glittered through their windows, millions of lights representing millions of lives, each one carrying its own story of loss and hope and second chances. But inside this house, in this moment, Cole Harrison had everything that mattered. A wife who'd learned to trust, a daughter who'd learned to heal, twins who'd never know a world where they weren't wanted. A family built not on fairy tale perfection, but on daily choices to show up and keep showing up, no matter how hard it got. This was there forever, and it was just beginning.